Hello, rinig ba ako? Back to Alright.
Actually, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You need to know that quickly. Just try to have it connected. So, so
Uh, GB also support one of the authors.
welcome to How about your home?
Isa is on the way.
Can you start? Is that so? We'll wait for her. And then start. Let's start.
We can start by she said to go on. She can present the from work.
Let me just get your Bible. Unless you have it somewhere. Alright, so today's thank you for coming here. Today we have Mr. Timothy Alvarez Paul as our speaker today. So he is an urban and cultural heritage specialist focusing on the conservation of built environment in top and new plants. He has worked on the facility, including the Manila Metropolitan Theater and Rizal Museum. In 2023, he obtained an Erasmus joint master's degree in architecture, landscape, and archaeology, and was 2023 to 24 intern for the GCI's Considering Modern Architecture Initiative. So,
Morning, everyone. Really good to be here. And I acknowledge also the presence of one of our co-authors for this paper. Jose So what we'll be presenting today is the highlight relocating the Manila in contemporary life memory. This paper was just recently presented at CEPA Festival on the 28th of August, so just a few days ago. So what we wanted to do here is to explore the idea of IVR, so immersive virtual reality, and that experience for institutional heritage. So to give a short background on the paper, which will be published at the end of September, it's divided into four sections. So first we'll introduce the building, so for audience, but also for the benefit of people who are familiar with the highlight building. We'll also introduce the highlight itself and application of immersive virtual reality. And the reception to this study by the experts. We'll conclude with some comment on how the experience, how we got the experience, at the same time future opportunities for the project. So to begin, let's start with immersive virtual reality. We're thinking as a key tool in heritage education. Why, why do we need this? Well, immersive virtual reality allows us to explore worlds that no longer exist. in our minds, the highlight is a tangible built heritage that has entered the world of the intangible. So we wanted to understand built cultural heritage through increased accessibility of immersive virtual reality because it's portable, it's low cost, and we wanted to see how exposure to digital recreations could impact people's presence, emotion, and nostalgia. So we wanted to engage, as I said, with intangible heritage and create discussions on cultural memory through its engagement. Oh, all right. So be focusing on the use of IVR as a tool for understanding and making accessible lost or demolished heritage, measuring its efficacy using the concept of presence. And within the Philippine context, we're focusing on the higher level because here, immersive virtual learning, I also like the presence of Isa Perez, one of our co-presenters, one of your one. So in the Philippines, there's a potential for the addition of immersive virtual reality as this sort of didactic installation, didactic or teaching opportunity that provokes communities into participatory heritage involvement. So a little bit in the Philippines, while pre-colonial and colonial heritage has been firmly established as important to our heritage narrative, the same cannot be said for 20th century heritage, particularly those in the article to the modern and later. So the reconstruction of 20th century heritage in Manila necessitates an expedited approach to adapting these kinds of technologies, factor documentation, and the use of digital technologies to make the valuing of these types of heritage more accessible to everyone. This stands against the prevailing erroneous dichotomy that I'm sure all of us encounter of this so-called heritage versus development argument that heritage is a stumbling block for our progress. But we can demonstrate that there is value in keeping part of our history alive. And that's what gives our cities and our environments meaning. And that's what gives them value that we could showcase because that's truly we can build a building that's the next year, but the fact of the matter is it's going to be 1 year old building. But you cannot create that story that has to unfold over 50, 100, 200 years. So of course, there's also a growing need to allow people to understand that this is essential, and that's part of Islam of public awareness and communal awareness. This issue is embodied by the case of the Manila Highlight, a masterpiece by Mortimer Beckett built in 1940. So it was the showpiece of streamlined echo in the forest. So the Highlight building, here's the proposal in 1939 for building, was proposed by Walton Beckett after President Quezon went to the U.S. He went to the U.S. in 1906 to present a speech to Congress. And when he dropped by LA, he saw the Pan Pacific Auditorium, then Burgessburg. And through a conversation with this architect, he invited him to do socialized housing in the country. But on the way, he met the investors from the Shanghai Fund Fund. And they made a collaboration that led to the largest commission at that time, $1 million in 1939. So this is meant to be a showcase of how ready the Philippines was for being its own nation. Because at this time, we were the only colony of the U.S. in the Far East, and they wanted to show that they were able to turn little brown brothers into a civilized nation. And part of that, we're showing that we have education, we have museums, we have spaces of culture, such as the Hayat. And it wasn't only a sporting thing. It was also a space it was the de facto social space. They would host dignitaries here, they would host debuts, they would host weddings, international delegations. And clearly you can see inside no expense was spared. On the left, the sky room occupies the top 2 floors here. It's cylinder cylinder with fantastic views of the Manila sunset.
Okay, tayo.
On the left, the sky room occupies the top two floors of the center glass cylinder with fantastic views of Manila Bay. So we see in the middle, you have a sculpture in the lobby that is actually attributed to Filipino, to Italian sculptor Francesco Marini, together with Filipino, Chinese, American artists and artisans. So it's truly an international collaboration. Here, Beckett's ethos of total design and attention to detail was in full display. So everything from the building itself to the gobiernos, Rinoy niya, ganun siya kapusisi with his plans. And that's actually what led to this project. So aside from being a 1,400-seater sporting venue, it was also the center of social life and hosting countless dignitaries well into the 1940s. Unfortunately, that was the trouble. World War II. We all know what happened to Manila then. But because it's one of the earliest, one of the most prominent reinforced concrete structures in Manila, pinag-aagawan siya ng mga Hapon, tsaka ng mga Amerikano. Kasi ang kapal ng Manila. So it was used as both headquarters of the Japanese and the American English forces. It was heavily bombed. Eventually, after the war, it was converted into it was first restored as the Roosevelt Club. So almost all of the servicemen, allied servicemen,
Try to increase your volume daw
would
sa
come to
laptop.
celebrate at the Roosevelt. Eventually, 46, it was turned over to
Ang
Thailand
volume
operation.
talaga.
And it continued its function as a sporting venue up until in the 80s, medyo nag-sour na yung idea ng highlight. Because there was this association with gambling, corruption, and match fixing. And unfortunately, that made the highlight sport in a negative light. Yes, yung prangkisa niya, kinansela. And in 1994, the building is closed. Which was unfortunate for an active of such a storyteller surviving World War II. It did not survive dito at EDSA. So, after all that, si Ito Atienza pala ang magiging katapat niya, hindi niya ma-survive. In 2000, it was demolished to build a so-called city courthouse. Na, as you know, up to now, it never materialized. It was demolished on July 15, despite international opposition, because it was well known as one of the largest highlight venues. Art Deco, Art Deco groups from all over the world, including the newly formed Heritage Conservation Society, actually protest and write letters to the government to stop its demolition. But alas, hindi siya naprotektahan. Because at that time, we didn't have heritage laws na. And more particularly, heritage laws for modern buildings. So the destruction of the highlights, much like yung destruction ng Penn Station sa United States, galvanized the modern heritage conservation movement in the Philippines. Finally, it led to the Heritage Act of 2009, almost a decade after its demolition. It's this legacy, not just a symbol of the heritage movement or its emergence in the Philippines, but also its long narrative of the Art Deco aesthetic that we hope to honor in the highlight project. Which brings us to the project itself. Si Isa naman.
So, tingnan mo yung word play. Hi, alive! So, very Pinoy nga daw, according to my friends, the attack. But at the same time, we feel like it's very natural for us to go this route. Kasi we're trying to make light of such a very huge task. Kasi as we go along, here are the objectives kasi. So we wanted it to be a pilot study for digital reconstruction as a means to learn about and to interpret lost built. Kasi most of the interpretations that we come across in built heritage is okay, document, take pictures, document, and then it becomes a static form, it becomes a static object. wala yung what then, what after. So palagi it's up to the interpretation of other people. But how about how do we go beyond that? We wanted this approach to be a little bit more different. And the use of IVR wanted to also enabled us to get feedback from the people who are supposed to be with. Kasi once in other projects say you leave them the piece to be transcribed, the piece to be siguro like drawings or pictures, but you don't necessarily remain there to hear their feedback. And what are you going to do with the feedback after? And we also wanted to gauge how effective IVR is in bringing out feelings and memory that can then be used in further reconstruction of the building. So this would lead us to having the piece, or rather yung reconstructing namin, to become a participatory medium for documenting and expressing collective and oral history. So as we develop parts of the building, we also try to set out, have people experience what we've constructed so far, get their feedback and reintegrate it into the building. Reintegrate it into the model as some form of living narrative. So. Hi, sorry. Yeah. So first we have to understand that all plans in Manila were lost to World War II. Didn't even really think that this was possible. And there was never even any documentation for the building before the demolition because it wasn't really considered important by the government. So to this point, the high alarm remained as nostalgia and a distant memory. That is until through Getty, we were able to access the originals. And these had been moved out from Fred's firm in LA before the war broke out. And some 500 plus drawings, hand-drawn plans. And this, plus other archival resources, we were able to get from other libraries, other journals, form the basis of the reconstruction. So sobrang extensive na data collected. So like, what do, but of course, we had an idea what to do after. So we focused first on the spiral based on yung case na present itong kanina, palitin kanina. The spiral was the social space, the social space. So it was the main social venue. It was the large function hall at the core of the building. And because of its accessibility, its function, and social dimension. And the fact that there are limited photos but quite detailed archival information doon based sa nakuha from them. And okay, we then start the process. So the process, we have all of these photos based on the documents in Getty. So one by one, pinicturean sila. Okay. The next one, selected sheets of the spare room were processed or rectified in Photoshop. Sa Adobe.
So when we say auto rectified, for those that are not familiar with the term, we adjust the perspective so that it's totally flat and distorted in the image. Permanently place.
So after that, those digital images were then retraced in another software. So magkakaroon siya ng vectorized version, meaning meron siyang digital translation ng line na ito, which can then be imported into other software. So parang mga minimum of 3 software jobs at this point. So the next one, after we get that file, ilipat namin to become 3D modules. So from 2D, 3D na. And then we developed the Skyrim based on all the specifications na nakasulat, which were included in the archival documents. And the resulting vector drawing was the basis for the model and total design lahat. So meaning from chairs to tables to lighting, fixtures to lights, the placement. We also cross-reference this with the archival photos. So tama ba yung placement niya? Is this just a temporary placement for a certain event? Or ito yung consistent placement ng furniture niya? And
we're able to render it then in Twin Motion, so that's a rendering software. And we're very thankful to Beckham kasi mabusisi siya sa dance niya. So kahit yung kulay yung tela, yung finishes ng sahig, lahat tinog niya. So we're able to generate a very accurate rendition, at least yung idealized form ng building based on his plans. Hindi natin malalaman kung sinundan siya on the ground, but based on his plans, we're able to get yung tamang finishes ng walls. So yun yung pinasok natin sa rendering software.
So after the render was done, how did we then experience it in the format that we wanted, which was IVR? So another couple of exports was fine. After rendering it, we had to export it into with motion span tracer.
Yeah.
With motion span tracer para makakuha kami ng panoramic views. And then we had to apply on another software, the Panel to VR, which would create the IVR tour, which like the four views of the model. So there are 4 areas in the entire Skyrim that you can visit. And yeah.
So may mga hotspots yun. So when you're looking at it, and by the way later, whoever wants stories sa mga viewers online, pero whoever's here, pwede nyo subukan later, we have a working model. Because we want it to be low cost, portable, yun yung importante. Because we were presenting, that's why it's very detailed with the technical steps. Kasi we're presenting it to a forum that deals with digital heritage. So they wanted to see steps. Pero what the point is, we wanted it to be accessible and low cost because we don't have the funds for Oculus VR or those Apple products. So we want something that everyone can use.
So parang the naging naging sub goal tuloy is to inaccessible. Yeah, we would get some comments saying wait, but that wasn't the point. We wanted na it's an accessible form of heritage education. So here's some views side by side. So this is the of course on the left, that's the original, and on the right that's our reconstructed view. Medyo wide lang siya, some works here and there, but it's similar finishing, same duster ng kahoy.
Pati yung plating tsaka lighting sa mesa, dahil din renewing ka. So you go to reconstruct the item.
Next. This is another part of the sky room. So there is this oak lighting in the middle. And next is yung crystal part. So this was really hard to interpret, but thanks to the team, sobrang galing to do this. So again,
Sorry, how did you color it? How you just guessed that? Actually, so we have some of the colorized photos. We just can't present them here because we're still getting permissions from the archives. Yung mga copyright issues yun. Pero merong accurate colors speaking of photographs. And yun
Pero in the 1940s, the colors.
There is both the specification of the color on the plan, and then they also had colored with the black lights.
That's no your imagination.
Yung hand colored yung ng architect yung black and white. So meron siyang watercolor reference. So from one of these 3D, yung enrolled. For the experiment, we selected 20 participants. So there were 7 pelotari. So pelotari, so yung mga naglalaro ng highlight. Who have played at the highlight of the 8 attended games. And 5 youth or young heritage advocates that have not visited the structure, pero they know of it in their books and their studies, or just they're just interested. So yung experimental procedure, very simple lang. Kahit saan sila, we go to them. And then we provided the background and backup for Skyrim, how to use the device, how to proceed. And then we allow them to freely explore yung virtual environment. Afterwards, there's a question that we hope to answer this thing. So, makita natin yung spiral na to, yung experimental procedure, yung dito tayo sa feedback and participation. So, from designing the building to creating the program, we wanted to tap into this idea of collective memory and nostalgia ng tao, to tap into that through the virtual reality experience. Tapos yung responses nila, ito feedback dun sa model para gawing mas akin. So we need a larger sample size para we can aggregate yung mga anong naalala ng tao at specific periods of that. kasi nga kulang ng documentation for, let's say, 70s or 80s. So we invite them to annotate narrative and add their experience to collected memory database para mag-build mo ang sarili to experience later iterations ng high-level experience. So the metric we therefore is presence. So yung subjective state of consciousness. And there is a questionnaire designed for this digital environment. It's called the Presence Questionnaire by this French organization called NIME. So we made a slightly modified version that deals with 7 metrics. So in 16 questions, and this so-called think aloud process. Habang ginagawa mo yung VR, record namin sila. Kasi ideally, after the experience, interview namin. Pero for some people, naging malakas yung impact ng VR that even as they were viewing it, they were talking and describing what they remember. And that's what we try to capture in the think aloud process. So, ito meron statistics. We measured 7 factors. The first one is general presence, yung overall sense of being there. So, mataas siya, so kita natin. With the players creating general presence at the maximum. So that's it, they felt that they were there. And they felt spatial presence, hindi lang felt like they were there, they felt like they were physically there. Kasi nakatayo sila doon, hindi lang sila disembodied post looking around. And players again like rated this the highest. So it's interesting though na yung general presence, tsaka yung spatial presence, lalo na sa virtual environment. As people get younger, mas nagkakaroon ng disconnect. And yung hypothesis natin doon is while younger people would be more familiar with virtual environments and are able to more readily distinguish ano yung virtual sa yung physical world. Pero in general, 90% of the participants still rated it above the minimum. Yung involvement, ito yung degree of attention. Ito medyo challenging because we can control the environment. So for the players, they were all being interviewed at Casino Espanyol. So it was a highlight point. That's some of the portion. And the environment was a bit more quiet. But in most cases, dahil nasa ingay yung environment, nakakasira siya ng immersion yung tutorial. Which brings us to realism. So this is the fidelity of the room. How accurate is it to be life? And for most people, distinguish nila na ako na 3 pages of book. Which is we're part thankful. Kasi medyo scary din na hindi mo distinguish na ako sa yung book na generated. And that's also something that we foresee will improve over time as the game methodology. Especially for low-cost devices. Pero I want to dwell on the last week, itong knowledge and memory. So knowledge is a metric we introduce to see how virtual reality is able to import knowledge and how to report the 100% good rate of the report. The may natutunan sila from the space, which is one of the main goals of the project. Especially for the youth, kasi wala silang experience to learn. So halos na bagong learning para sa kanila. And feeling, particularly strong to para sa mga may youth experience to higher. You have to understand the decades yung mga players na galing sa higher. So they built their careers there, sila yung mga superstars ng Pilipinas. Tapos sa 1994, ang seriously came out sila. And ito yung moment na nare-live nila yung glory days nila 30 years after yung closure ng building. And meron ibang, actually there were 2 planetary na nagyak pa when they were experiencing the virtual reality. Right? So, kita yung effective power yung virtual reality, especially for recording collective memory and all of stories. Yun lang nga, may challenge kasi we depicted it in a time na bago siya ng panahon. Kasi we based on plans. Baka iba rin yung naging experience nila. So, at some point, baka magkaroon ng disconnect that we have to verify yung further iterations ng space. And that also relates to yung idea ng memory. kung paano ng VR environment can trigger yung recollections ng memory elements. Even before the survey, kaya sa kanila, if they allow the process, tumutuloy na. So, meron isa na suot niya sa yung upo na to, dito ko dinedate dati, ngayon asawa ko na. So, naalala pa nila yung exact location, kung saan. And they're saying, behind the store, we have that, bumaba, yung kami nagpapahinga, doon yung nag para makita namin yung turn na natin. Tapos, nadi-describe nila, tapos, may hand gestures pa, we have videos of some players, very visual human, spatial human, their experience. And I think that's really important, kasi it's hard to extract those from the images. So having that immersive environment, being that is really helpful for all of this. So, and that's really the point of all of this. Yung technology, hindi talaga siya end goal, yung project. It's really a means to extract or to your this sharing of oral histories. Kasi fortunate tayo with mga tao na naka-experience to, yung mga contributors. Buhay pa sila, never memories. Hindi ganun ka-fit with in some cases, pero nag-exist pa rin sila that will take for future generations. And it's a resource we really have to have. And we also have to record that to honor their memories. So what are the conclusions we have from this? The valuable ITR is a participatory heritage. And it should form part pa rin of a system that of information sources that make richer experiences of our past accessible to the future. Yung presence questionnaire, validate yung emotional engagement na kailangan pa rin i-verify against narratives and yung tinatawag fact of memory. So nag-invent yung brain ng memories based on the present na nakikita nila sa virtual reality environment. So that's something we're still figuring out how to do this. And we foresee yung challenges ng visual and experiential fidelity, magdi-decrease siya as nag-improve yung technology over time. Lastly, intro to sa High Life Project kasi isa rin pa na nagagawa namin. And we've tapped into social media to find the participants. And nagsimula na kami to tap into Facebook as an open call for the community archive. Tapos hopefully mas maraming interest kasi passion project namin siya. Tapos we're just paying everything out for profit because we just really like the building. So we'd like to acknowledge the Getty Research Institute, National Library of Australia, the National Library of the Philippines, UP Main Library, College of Music Library, and the College of Architecture Library for access to collections. Dom Galicia, because he was there when the buildings were demolished. Siyempre yung participants ng study, in particular the Casino Espanyol Amateur Pedantry Association, who still continue to play the game, who continue to play the sport in Casino Espanyol, right behind the lot of the INI. And members of Heritage Conservation Society, and one of our friends, Miguel Feliciano, kasi nabalik siya mag-demote. And of course, the warm souls that are presently occupying the highlight property. Kasi tao, buhay sila.
Warm souls.
Who's not the warm souls? Without this generous participation, this research would not be possible. So yeah, thank you so much. If you want interested, feel free to ask questions. Here's our details.
Wow. For their speakers. So now we are opening the floor to any questions for any of the speakers. So please raise your hand. Yes, sir.
What other buildings are you interested in regenerating in three companies aside from what other historical buildings in Manila or outside of Manila are you interested also in recreating in a three dimensions?
We're quite interested in 20th century and modern buildings. Kasi sila yung pinaka under-threat, the motion.
House,
Backhouse, and above, yes, and younger. Pero
mid-century modern.
mid-century modern definitely. But in this particular case kasi, you're fortunate enough na yung archival data, yung mga plano, available sa atin at the same time. And I think it's also a challenge with other buildings dahil the archives may not be accessible. And that's what we're trying to do is a very accurate reconstruction.
Are these houses or the office buildings or hotels, government buildings?
Any certain time period.
So that what time period would that be?
Um,
The 1940s to 60s.
late 1930s to 70s.
Sa local ka.
Pero we have finished filming this. Medyo malayo pa kami for highlight of the year.
Anyone else? Yes.
Oh, yun kasi sa mga ways.
Actually, yung technology ng VR can be done on a lot of heritage sites, not only the highlight. And it's just a case of being able to record the environment in a particular way that allows you to create panorams. And
Usually, you only have the first floor. And then plans that we have. The rules we study with, historical churches and others. The first floor, and then we bridge it by the other, the rest of the building in collaboration with architects. So unlike your 20th century buildings, we lack that as identity.
then it will be coming from the archaeological or architectural interpretation, pero just the same if you're able to create these purple environments. But I think it would be also nice if you have the ruins, because in our case, the have map this inside these people, but in the case of the ruins, you can. We're also exploring in the future yung idea ng augmented reality. Augmented would be the virtual and then the pass to that real. So, naka-on yung camera, and pwede mag-overlay ng reconstruction of the room. So when you're standing there, you can see the reconstruction exactly where it is. Then again, QR codes siya kung mga targets. So that's the next thing we're trying to do with highlight. Kasi on the side, may mga fatal doon.
What's an estimated funding that we require to accomplish all your objectives?
We haven't done funding yet because
Yeah, but we estimate,
ang pinakamahal yung licenses. Tsaka yung expertise ng mga nagpo-model. Kasi hindi yung artist yung tinatapon. So, wala akong bigay, pero I'll get back to you on that process.
and our NHC would understand since the right people, they might be.
I'm pretty sure they would be, because based on the conference talk that we attended, it's the direction of most cultural heritage institutions around the world to shift towards the state-driven and augmented reality environment to monitor heritage sites. And also yung data component. So they're moving towards this direction of report. Kasi mas readily accessible siya, not only for people to visit, but also for people who are not able to visit. One which go with
And VR be accessible or be accessed by the mass.
actually we're just using an Android phone. So install lang yung app. Tapos yung pag naka-connect yung app dun sa server, nandun yung model, pwede nila i-experience.
We have connected here with like.
Sorry, sir, may I just ask, if that's a Google,
It's Google Cardboard.
this one, and how much is that saving SRP?
250.
Oh,
Pesos?
what?
The programs are what's
250 USD.
pesos. Get it on Shopee. It's just a dumb viewer, so it's just 2 lenses. So what's more expensive would be the software talaga. So yung software licenses niya, it's a bit more niche. And
So when we buy that, we can access that.
yes,
What app do we access it?
so there are panel virtual reality viewers. Pero as of now, i-disclose ko lang na hindi pa namin siya na-upload online. Hindi siya tapos. Pero when it's done, pwede siya may access to just get yung viewer. So we invited schools that have 1 or 2 of things.
Pero what will you be, what will the attendants be able to see later through that?
The Sky Room will inform for us. So later we can try it out.
The demo after.
I guess.
Kunyari, marami nang and hindi na other picture di ba? Pag marami, okay mo kayo i-gamify parang din of the games.
Yes, definitely. Kasi it's part of the learning process. Yung mga tinatawag na serious games. And serious games are really one way to get people interested in for trying them.
I don't have a question, but I have some thoughts which I don't know if you or no one here saw it on the building as it was. Yeah, I have a memory because I studied staff. See, so I would take the first from Manila, so it's sad to say for the meal. So every morning I would see it, so I'd like to suggest maybe one thing you can add to the VR is the most common memory of the building, masa talaga. Kasi hindi naman lahat mapasok mo, I mean, it's just a building, or what every, I think the most major collective memory that people have are people riding the LRT.
Yung view from the top.
Yes, yun. Pwede yun nangyayari. Makes sense. Actually, parang mas yung VR, thinking about it now, the sense, kasi syempre yung tracks, hindi naman siya diretso will find it.
Yeah.
It's that sensation of looking at that building from there.
Incorporate that when
Yeah, I think that's the most collective memory that everyone, the people who see the building has. So I really thank you for doing all of this. And yeah, I don't have memory of being inside. It's so nice to have a part in my own personal memory. So I also want to suggest we need to keep these memories in our literature. Heritage, like memory, buildings, they're so easily lost. But if they're in literature, future generations will go back. So I think one idea that I thought of, say so it's we're part of the movie, speculative fiction. Maybe you can do a session with them or any literature group and then tell them, oh, why don't you write stories as you imagine the building will be or just use it as I see the building as a deadly part of your story or something like that. Para like permeate siya into culture. Kasi hindi lang siya, as a VR. As an
yes, yun pala, we were able to find one of the performers, makita niyo yung story nila, they're called the King's Orchestra. So they used to be at the Santa Ana Cabaret. Tapos pinainig sila ng highlight. So makita niyo yung story nila sa VR. Pero we were able to find out na buhay pa pala yung isang artist doon, si Nardi Aristoteles. And he was able to perform one of his pieces in 2004 at the Carillon. He was 91. And that recording is what you hear here. It's contemporaneation.
Was he able to interview any of the players?
Yes po. During the viewer experience, 7 of them we were able to interview.
I think I do wish I have a question.
May question po sa akin.
Is there any question that was you?
Wala.
Okay.
Alright,
So, I think that's what.
Ipagpatuloy yung building. Kasi
Is
it's just,
there any buildings in mind?
we're still on the lookout for archives that we can tap into. Or if there are other groups that are doing the same, we can explore yung moving it from 3D to reality. That would be fun. So, because there are a lot of groups who are looking into heritage and reconstruction. but taking it to the totality of reality as the next step, we'd be very interested in working with.
Yes. Sa escort kami sa pinamig dilapidated weeks na pagka-mahukay, pinamigari or
Especially yung PNB na sayang talaga.
Yes, question.
Is it possible to do with elbow? Kahit naman. Just so possible.
You mentioned previous, right? No, it's not around this sort of very historical.
Wala din yung industriya.
Sobrang kailangan na siya mag-outs. And the last time I went there, kasi I would participate more than the corner. Who's the Chinese, so parang, may nalagatan ng mga outs. Kasi yung gusto niya gawin pa rin daw, pero ayaw din na permission ng necessity. And they are fighting over that.
So wondering possible. It's quite possible. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, there have been several theses about virtual reconstruction of that building. So this is the next step, yung more archival data and related to an explorable environment.
Pero finally, kapag pwede yung mga malalaking architectural firms, pwede kasi pumasok sa water social responsibility yung funds na building natin. Might be weakness at first, na nila, kasi hindi ko pa din sila, but within years kung harming dry. So, kailangan nila mula yung level writing. And then, yung fee, baka pwede din sa FINMA kasi isang advocate ng archaeology. Si Mrs. Lerosa. Si Mary.
Practice for a grant better right.
Yes. Asking for grants. Na pwede yung i-emphasize ng under CSR nila.
Thank you so much for
So
that.
it will also benefit them. You mentioned this is a passion project for you, but on a personal level, what's strong you? What's the story behind your passion for it? Isn't that in among buildings on your own? When did you start being fascinated?
Is the building specific? Parang lahat kami po ma'am nag-start when we were in college. We were exposed to siguro at work or someone gave a lecture on the heritage and involvements. Pwede pa lang volunteer dito ganyan, so I started with volunteering. I think our common denominator is that we both volunteered for Escolta at one point. And doon kami lalong na liwanagan. Personal building, Alexander Pugar, and that became Metropolitan Theater as well. And then from then on, we started to get involved in other heritage projects. Parang, I think it's different for Tong and I, but hindi ko, parang I found myself in heritage kasi as an intersection of architecture and interest in history. So, meron palang ganun, I feel. So, for
For me naman, I was interested in this particular time in buildings. And for the highlight in particular, when I was in the Getty for my internship, because everywhere I go, the bathroom place, lagi ako punta sa library. Tapos ko, hanapin ko sa OPAC nila, repeats. And the US natin sa Getty pala, sa archives nila, they have decades old architectural archive. And I requested access, and they were very deceptive about it. That there are people who are quite interested in this work and say, yes, because for us, Filipinos, source of pride. And it's also something that it's one of the largest what ifs we have in the heritage conservation work. What could have happened at the highlight. And sabi ko kung yun lang, okay. Pero once we saw all the 500 plans, na parang, lahat ng data coverage to building is na hindi nakaka-capture lang yung photos na lagi natin nakikita sa inyo. I think it was part of our responsibility to make sure that people have access to that. Yeah.
Any more questions? All right, so I would like to thank our speakers, Mr. Kim Wong. And the best So thank you everyone for joining us for today's Manala. Please stay tuned for next week's Manala, and if you have further questions, you may speak to me. So, thank you.
Pico boss. Yes po. I just entered. Kapasok ko lang. You can get funding from the So,
Thank you.